Hi everyone, so this is part 2 of cerebral palsy and ageing. I'm Jade, I have ataxic cerebral palsy. It's worse down my left side, but it does affect both sides of my body in all 4 limbs. I am an ambulatory, I walk. I still walk now at the age of nearly 33. I started using a walking aid at 24 and I got my wheelchair about 5 years ago now that I use when it's needed. I do walk unaided still around my home and around my family members' homes that are familiar to me, but anywhere else I will use my walking aid or wheelchair. For me, my symptoms of cerebral palsy, my main symptoms are a lack of balance, not very good depth perception, I struggle with navigation, I am quite wobbly, I walk with a very profound limp, I have a curve in my spine which is quite prominently visible when I stand, I have muscle weakness down the sides of my legs and the muscle is quite poor there. I have bladder problems due to my CP, and I also get a lot of issues with my shoulders, my neck and my back, as well as chronic fatigue, chronic pain and dysphagia. So for me, a lot of my symptoms that I had as a child, they kind of went into remission, as it were, when I got into my teenage years. And didn't really bother me much. The main symptoms that still obviously bothered me, of course, were my bladder, my balance, my walking, walking with a limp, and back pain. But other than that, I was pretty much all right. I've always struggled with navigation. But yeah, so as I got a bit older into my 20s, I noticed that I was really struggling with being able to maintain stamina when doing something physical like walking or something like that, and I would get really tired. Now for a while I put it down to the fact that I was working full-time at the time and that maybe I'd had some sort of flu or illness that had caused me to become fatigued, but the fatigue just didn't go away. It was an overwhelming fatigue where I could sleep for hours on end and I would not feel at all rested. My limbs would feel heavy and I would get flu-like symptoms that would generally make me very unwell. And then shortly after this period of chronic fatigue came the pain. Now, again, I put this down to maybe overuse of certain muscles, or that I'd overdone it at work, or an injury that had flared up, as I do have ligament damage in my feet, but the pain just didn't go away and it became worse and worse as time went on with the fatigue. And I was then diagnosed with fibromyalgia at the age of 24, as well as chronic migraines, which in some parts have plagued my life. They're quite under control now with a medication, but at one point I was having migraines more than I wasn't having migraines. So as I've aged, for me, the main things that it has affected, other than the extreme fatigue and the pain, is I struggle even more so now with navigation the older I've got, especially in new places, and I think this is because of the concentration that it takes to maintain the stamina that it takes to move through space. And by that I mean, imagine getting off a train at a busy station. You have to mind the gap, you have to mind out for people, you may have to navigate a flight of stairs, perhaps you might have to walk along a narrow path, okay? These things, as I said in my previous video, for someone with a damaged brain that doesn't have that part of their brain intact, it is a very difficult thing to do, and it's not an easy thing. A lot of us make it look easy. We make it look as though we just glide in our wheelchair and it's all fine, or that we do well but we've just got a bit of a limp, but underneath it's like a swan, Okay, we might look like we've got it all together, but actually under the surface there's a lot going on up here to make sure that we can keep this level going. I have a very poor sense of direction, always have done. I very rarely go anywhere on my own unless it is a very, very familiar route, like some of the places I walk my dogs I'm very familiar with. But if I'm going anywhere new, I will always be accompanied by a family member or very close friend that understands how my CP affects me, so that they can help me navigate, and they're there in case I fall or we have to go over any uneven terrain. At that point, I will have a big shout out to my dad, who is also on TikTok, because my dad is amazing. If I ring up my dad and say, Dad, I'd like to go to a new place, walk the dogs, he's there, you know, we go together, and he will make sure that I'm fine. If I need any help with navigating uneven terrain, or that I'm worried, or I feel I'm going to fall, my dad, you know, he's a top guy. Another issue that has affected me as I have aged is bladder problems. Now, I've always had bladder problems. I'm told that I toilet trained normally as a child without issue, and then the bladder problems came in later. So I've been medicated for this throughout my life. I've also had a test on my bladder, and my bladder cannot hold as much as a normal bladder before it thinks it's full. So it fills up halfway, and then my brain thinks it's full, and yeah, apparently it's part of the brain injury. But this can fluctuate as well. My continence really can fluctuate day to day. Sometimes it's good and I am very continent, and sometimes it's really, really not good. Another thing that I've struggled with as I've aged is trouble swallowing, also known as dysphagia. Now, this is something that has worsened as I have aged. But again, it really fluctuates. If I've been unwell with a flu or a cold or a virus, my swallow is not safe. So it will really affect what I can eat, the texture of the food, and, you know, if I can eat it at all. The week before, I may have been fine with that food, but now that I've got this flu, cold, whatever I may have, that food is no longer safe and I can no longer swallow it. It just won't. The muscle just doesn't work well enough to be consistent all the time. I also struggle a lot with pain in my hips and my shoulders and my back. So I use my upper body to walk. I have quite muscly shoulders for a girl, and the muscle is quite well developed, as you can see, and that is because when I'm walking, I'm from the shoulders like this rather than using the glutes, a bit like a puppet on a string. So I get really achy shoulders because not only are they dealing with controlling my legs, they also control everything else that your shoulder muscles control on top of that. So they get very, very sore, very, very knotty, and I get a lot of trapped nerves. I also get really bad back pain because, as you might be able to see in other videos, when I stand, I have what is known as a C-shaped spine. So if I turn onto the side here, my spine is, you know, I don't think you can really see it now, but there is a noticeable bend. It makes me look like I have a very big bum. Excuse the squeaking of the chair. But this puts a lot of pressure on my lower back and really, really hurts my back. And yeah, as I've said before, the general fatigue and things like that, and also just the loss of mobility due to muscle wear and tear. So if there's anything else that you want to know about ageing with CP, that's a little bit about me and how I've aged and how it affects me. But I also want to do more in-depth videos on CP symptoms, misconceptions, and unhelpful attitudes that I have come across, of which there are many. So if you would like to see another video on CP, or if there's anything you want me to do a video about, any questions, leave me a comment below and I will get back to you. And as always, God bless.